Can you hear me? As many of you may have heard, the renowned physicist Stephen Hawking departed from the universe within the walnut shell confines of his home on March 14, 2018. And, as many of you may have noticed, this brilliant mind, born on the 300th anniversary of Galileo's death, left us on Pi Day, the day Albert Einstein was born. Who the heck was this Stephen Hawking? Everyone, whether familiar or unfamiliar with him, had something to say about him. As I pondered, wondering what else there was to be said, I recalled the role he played in my personal story. I first encountered him in the 90s when I was a university student. I say encountered because meeting an author is quite simple. You pick up their book and read it. So, I did. I read A Brief History of Time. This is a popular science book, especially this version with its new edition filled with illustrated drawings and graphics. It doesn't contain any formulas other than Einstein's famous E=mc², as it is written for ordinary people like us who are not scientists but are curious about these topics. However, I must confess that when I read the first version of the book, I had some difficulty understanding certain sections. So, some parts of this video may not immediately make sense to you because I not only want to talk about its more accessible aspects, but also about its contributions to science. So, brace yourselves. The book, in general, narrates the short story of time, starting from the Big Bang and extending to black holes. The short thing here is not time itself, but the story. Stephen Hawking, being one of the first names that come to mind when talking about the Big Bang, has become more visible lately, not only through his name but also in person, even in the famous comedy series, The Big Bang Theory. Yet, Stephen Hawking didn't just correct Sheldon's mistakes in the Big Bang Theory, he also attempted to fill in some missing parts in Einstein's theory that he had started developing. Especially the parts related to black holes. He argued that black holes are not actually as black as they seem. He said that they emit particles and, as a result, lose mass. This theoretical radiation is now called Hawking radiation. But why is this important? It is important because he arrived at this conclusion while trying to find the theory of everything. It is almost the only theory that can explain everything, sought by almost all scientists. I had published a video called The Largest and the Smallest recently. You'll remember that the video started in our dimensions and scale, in a world where Newton's laws apply. Then we expanded our scale to the observable universe, where Einstein's observations on the speed of light and the theory of relativity are valid. Then we started shrinking in the opposite direction, going to the subatomic world where quantum theory is valid. Stephen Hawking was looking for a theory that could unify such seemingly different worlds. He tried to reconcile quantum theory in the world of the smallest with the theory of relativity in the world of the largest. And what did he find while doing that? He found that black holes are not just giant entities trying to pull things in, but also lose mass through Hawking radiation. Wait a moment. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, black holes cannot shrink, the area of event horizons cannot decrease. This is a groundbreaking and surprising new theory for the scientific world. And that's why Stephen Hawking is not just an image seen in TV series. But let's go back to the series. After all, we have to talk about art as well. In one of them, Star Trek, these topics are delicately explored. You know Star Trek is a series set in the future, and there's a character named Data in this series. He represents intellect. And what could be the greatest fantasy of such a character? Hanging out with the most famous scientists in history, right? In this episode, he plays poker with Stephen Hawking and Albert Einstein. Einstein believes Hawking is bluffing, given his quite convincing poker face. And in the end, Hawking wins the game. So, can you guess the fourth person at the table? Isaac Newton. The first loser of the game. Did you get the references? Indeed, about 3 centuries ago, Isaac Newton made some of the most important contributions to the scientific world. He was the most popular scientist of his time until Einstein came along. Einstein sat at the table and developed a theory trying to better explain the universe, the theory of relativity. He became the new popular figure. So did Stephen Hawking, who sat at the table last, contribute more to science than these two names? That part is still being debated. But he definitely won in poker and popularity. Humanity is the real winner, of course. As Newton said, we stand on the shoulders of these giants to see further into the future. We rise, but we all can't fully understand what's happening. So, what else can we learn from these people besides physics? After all, not all of us will be physicists in this life. I don't know about you, but the most important thing I learned from Stephen Hawking is his determination to think, learn, and share what he learned. Imagine putting yourself in his shoes. You find out you're sick when you're just a 21-year-old university student. And it's such an illness that it affects your ability to walk, speak, swallow, and even breathe. When he was diagnosed, they told him he could only live for 2 years because he wouldn't be able to control his muscles anymore. Do you know what he said to the doctor who said that? He lived his life on a wheelchair. He almost lives a life like the brain in a jar we see in science fiction stories. When he lost his ability to speak, he began communicating with the outside world with the help of a computer. Although he couldn't move most of his muscles physically, he continued to think, work, and produce until the end of his life. Just like Beethoven, who started to become deaf towards the end of his life but continued to compose. He did not interrupt his work. What a beautiful story, right? Some people find this concept unbelievable. I looked at what was written about him on social media after Stephen Hawking died. Oh. Really, he must be a theoretical physicist. Some people on Twitter their eyes for no reason. Look at his appearance, and there must be a big team behind him. He can't write these on his own until the end of his life. Where is it? Some quite serious comments have been made. Now look, some people, who, despite having no physical disabilities, can't even produce anything with their teeth and nails. When they see someone like him who has no limits despite his disability, somehow don't want to believe that they can be so productive. They always look for a catch, thinking there must be something definite behind this. But let me tell you something, that catch is in your eyes. I'm not talking about you, dear, I don't mean you. It's in your eyes, your life perception. Of course, there will be a team behind such a person. In fact, not just a team but a whole community helped Stephen Hawking. We call it a university. It's a word that comes from Latin, meaning a community of students and teachers. A community of people whose job is education. Stephen Hawking began his academic journey at the University of Oxford. This university is the oldest in the English-speaking world. Its founding date cannot be precisely determined, but there is evidence of education being provided there in 1096. And to this day, for almost a millennium, educational activities have been ongoing. Later, Hawking moved to the University of Cambridge, continuing his studies there. This university has been in operation since 1209, and it's an educational institution with a rich history. In fact, Isaac Newton was a professor at this school, and he wrote his famous foundational book on classical mechanics there. Stephen Hawking, centuries later, held a position at the same school, a position that Newton once had. He became a Lucasian professor, one of the most prestigious titles in the academic world. When such educational activities persist from generation to generation for centuries, a strong academic tradition emerges. And now, not just Oxford or Cambridge, but many universities in the United Kingdom follow this academic tradition. In these universities, you don't just attend lectures, you participate in seminars, engage in discussions, speak, listen, and produce theses. If you don't like something, you develop an antithesis. You work on applied projects, actively engaging with instructors and professors. Through this, your critical thinking skills, productivity, and, of course, self-confidence develop. Like rare plants needing specific environments, scientists like Hawking can only thrive in such settings. even though he was given only 2 years to live at the age of 21 due to a debilitating illness. How else can we explain that he didn't wither away immediately? He remained active for another half-century, even mentoring 39 doctoral students in the final years of his life. Look at some retired individuals around you. If they can't find a meaningful pursuit, they wither away. On the other hand, when you place a mind struggling even to breathe in an oxygen-rich environment like this, it starts to sprout, grow, and develop. Despite having only a short time left in his life, he was able to turn the vastness of the universe into a book. Yes, the book you see was written by someone who couldn't even hold a pen. While some continue to praise or criticize him on social media for his lasting image, he collaborated on some of his theories with Roger Penrose, one of the world's most famous mathematicians. Penrose wrote that their joint work symbolized the supremacy of the mind over matter. Many people know me not for my scientific work, but from the Simpsons cartoon, once said Professor Hawking. However, he wasn't complaining about it. In fact, we can even say that he was enthusiastic about becoming such a popular culture icon. Despite his advancing age and physical condition, he traveled the world, gave speeches, and also took on roles in TV shows, not as a puppet controlled by a team but actively participating. In fact, he would even intervene in the scripts written for him in those shows by the writers. Remember the snippet from Star Trek that I showed you a little while ago? Well, he actually loved that series so much that he would even intervene in the scripts written for him in those shows. He expressed his desire to be a part of this series and made an offer. You know that famous voice of his, the copyright for it belongs to him. Despite being an old voice, as technology advanced, much better voice synthesizers emerged. Nevertheless, and despite speaking with an American accent, he was British, after all. He used the same voice until the end of his life. Yes, he branded himself in a way and tried to popularize science. But being able to do all of this in such a situation, this determination is the part that inspires me. Because, at one point, during a conference, he actually expressed his desire to go into space. Hearing this, Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Galactic, invited him to the zero-G plane. And of course, he accepted immediately. Can you see how happy he was experiencing an experiment that many of us wouldn't dare? After all, he was the one who encouraged us to look up at the stars instead of keeping our feet on the ground. My goal is very simple: to understand the universe in its entirety. Why it exists. He couldn't achieve a seemingly simple goal. He couldn't find the formula for everything. But despite being in that restrictive situation, he never stopped working toward that goal until the end of his life. As he himself said, no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do and succeed at. It all depends on not giving up. That's what Hawking taught me beyond physics. Because even though he couldn't speak, he could say a lot. Despite not having a voice, he could make his voice heard. Even though he couldn't move most of his muscles, he could still laugh and make others laugh. For those who may not believe it, they can listen to the subtle joke at the beginning of his last speech, just before he passed away.